So I've made my picks. Again, this set of victory conditions tends to promote a lot of competition, I think, because the high-valued things are generally something that you're opposed to someone else in, which is kind of why we saw Spain not doing so well and France doing okay in that early period. England wants to hold all their provinces, including Calais, but France wants Calais back, as well as all their original provinces. Because France has a time of trouble coming, so they could have some problems. England wants a monopoly in their CTC. They want to build a new colony, and they want, and this is kind of cool, at least two major countries in the same religion. Now, in this case, that's France and Spain. So we're gonna see a triumvirate of Catholicism here. I had to look that up. The Aristo event says it's just Catholic versus Protestant rather than Catholic counter-reform and Catholic conciliatory, because this would not be a workable option otherwise. In the historical situation, England had the Dutch as a pro-Protestant power, but not anyone else. And France would really be the only other option there. Because there's two countries out of the question, Turkey and Russia. They're not going to end up Catholic or Protestant. So you really don't have a lot of choices here. Anyway, here they aligned with that. France did the same thing. They have that same option. Spain does not. France also, though, went for the Calais, and they went for Scotland as an ally, as well as minors in the Holy Roman Empire. The Netherlands went for Protestant minor allies. The Atlantic and or Mediterranean centers of trade, they get points for either of them. Independence is worth 30 to them, and but they don't have a lot of control over that. And a monopoly in the Dutch Baltic, and they have those. This has to be total, which it is. English and French, they have the French. They're going to have to concentrate pretty hard to get a monopoly on England, though. England's got some decent values they've built up. Remember, they jumped ahead. Russia wants Siberia Steppes, Kazan, and Astrakhan. Pretty much this block, and then they want to break that. They want that anyway, and those are cheap things, so I was looking and said, hey, I want these. That's 100, but a minus 20 if you fail. They want more furs than the rest of the countries, the rest of the major powers in Europe. They want a port in Europe, which they actually already have. Oh, no, they don't. So they're going to want to get themselves involved in something. Now, there's the fall of Latvia, which is going to trigger this big war between Sweden and Poland. I don't know how that's going to work out. But they could also do it with a port on the Black Sea, which would be kind of nice for them. And they want to not lose any provinces. Nua becomes one if Peter the Great is born. Now, here's something weird. It's quite possible for Peter the Great to show up immediately as Ivan the Terrible, who's the current monarch's child. Expansion 2 has rules prohibiting that, and I'm assuming the EU8 also does. I'm not playing with those, so we're going to see that possibility happening. Unless I'm wrong and I saw that in the Aristo events, in which case I'll look there. Spain wants no Dutch independence. That's their biggie, 100 and minus 20 there. No Turks adjacent to the Habsburgs still. They've got to prevent the Turks from advancing any further. Sole defender of the Catholic faith, that's almost a gimme, unless some event takes it away from them. And no non-Spanish adjacent to the Caribbean. Right now that's the case, but well, historically, English and French grabbed some of those islands. So they might be getting themselves involved in wars they wouldn't otherwise perhaps want to get involved with. Turkey wants to eliminate the Knights this period. That's worth 75 points to them. They want the Mediterranean trade zone. That's going to be difficult. And then things start getting, well, maybe a little harder. No Christian on the Black or Caspian Sea. That's putting them directly in conflict with Russia's goals. They want half the European Muslim states in vassalage. That's really unlikely. And then they've got one where they're just taking the penalty. Now, this is weird. The Aristo events take this differently. You can't avoid, and in the original you could take a half point half value penalty. They didn't want to take this pick, and I'm kind of allowing them to take a half penalty on it rather than a full penalty. But it's no Christian ports adjacent to the Mediterranean or, well, the East Mediterranean or the Aegean. And there's so many Venetian ports, and they're fortified there. They just do not want to mess with that. It's a hassle for them. Of course, it does provide some refuge for the knights. And I think that's it. So yeah, I'm going to load this one up because it's about the length that I like to do, and probably the turn itself will be another decent length video. All depends on how many wars we have. Right now, though, it's almost guaranteed the Dutch are going to be revolting, and that's going to be a bit of a problem. Ooh, look at those stabilities, all clustered at the top now. They weren't that high before, were they? All right. So onward we go. So here we are in EU. This is the start of the third period, 1560. I think. Yeah. Spain and France exited their war with the White Peace. France somewhat regretting it because they know that the Dutch are going to be a problem for the Spanish, and they probably could take advantage of it. But they also do have their own religious problems coming up. The whole religious wars in France is a big set of events that happens in this period. One of their real defining factors, along with the Dutch Revolt, that's going to really be a major focus of this period. Next period is, of course, the 30 Years' War as its big focus. So maybe they're not too disappointed with that. They have some exploration and such they can do, which would be very difficult with this can't be right. He's not here. Is he? Yeah, he is. With an exposure of the I don't know what I was saying. Anyway, we see the truncated little Russia that's going to be in this. Now, historically, Russia was quite a bit larger, and if you look at their setup, they've got a big chunk of Poland that they really are unlikely to get prior to this scenario. I don't know what that's all supposed to mean. But if they get those and have that additional power, they're a little bit more of a threat than they are currently. We've got an ongoing war between the Habsburgs and the Turks, which is really kind of stymieing the Turks here. Of course, the fact, and this is kind of weird, the fact that the Hungarian inheritance happened boned the Spaniards out of some victory points. One of their goals was there to be no Turks next to Habsburg land. I may have screwed that up. I'll look back at it. But one that's bugging me a lot right now is this Russian Smolensk annexed to Russia during this period. Well, Smolensk is part of the Russian setup, I believe. Oh no, it was last period from the... okay. So, they can't get a bonus from that. I thought it was an original area of theirs that would be counted as a country, and that's not the case. So that's an extra bonus if they start out a little weaker, I guess. But yeah, I have to look at this, how this is worded. Which one is it? The Spaniards. No Turkish fraud adjacent to Habsburg national territory. So Spain, I owe them a few victory points from last period that they didn't gain, because the Hungarian inheritance gives them padding, and that's what I was counting on there. Okay, and I just misread it when I scored the point. Anyway, I'm in the midst of trying to figure these out. Basically, there's a whole bunch of rules on Russia that are new, because Russia's underdeveloped, so it costs more to move through their territory, but I'm not sure who that applies to. I don't think it applies to Russia. I have to look up they're not allowed to expand through Siberia until they defeat the Siberians, whatever that means. And I have to recall that. And they get some free exploration abilities going into the east. Now, on the other side, I've got the whole Dutch revolt to read up on to see how that's going to go. And that's what's particularly holding me here. Russia, I was able to kind of say, well, I know what I want to do. I don't know quite how I'm going to be able to manage it, but I know which goals I want to set up. But for the Dutch revolt, the Dutch want a peace with Spain. The question is, does Spain want that? Or do they want, this is a long period, but do they want the 100 victory points for never recognizing the Netherlands? If they never recognize the Netherlands, they get a lot of points. But that means they're going to be fighting the Dutch throughout this entire period. Now, what I've seen is when the Spaniards don't fight the Dutch, that's huge for the Dutch. They are able to focus on the rest of the world, really. And, so there are counterbalance there, but 100 points seems like a lot, and it is. It's basically the choice. Do you want the 100 points, or do you take the 20-point penalty? Basically, there's a 120-point swing here in hand. But if you're going to go for it, you're going to commit to it and just say, this entire period, I'm going to focus on staying at war with the Dutch, and I have enough income from all my mines, etc., that I can do that. It's going to be kind of interesting because England's still Catholic in this game. Now, again, I don't really know if I'm thrilled with when they make the choice as early as everyone else. It's essentially still in Henry VII or early in Henry VIII's reign that they had to make their choice of that they were going to remain Catholic. And that's not when they historically made it, but you could say, well, it's not that big a deal. And it really isn't. They haven't done much in that period that they could have avoided. I kind of like them having to make that choice rather than it just being a role effect. But on the other hand, I also kind of don't like seeing things happen out of historical order. I don't mind when they can happen out of historical order. This game obviously is not for someone who doesn't like it to ever be that way, but I don't like it when they're almost enforced to. And that's kind of the situation with the Russian growth. The Russian growth is going to be much smaller than it was historically before a player takes place. And once a player takes place, I actually contend it's harder. It's easier for them to grow when they're just rolling off the table. Anyway, I'll complete the victory point choices.